Between the late 19th century and the late 20th century, America saw a progressive rise in the acceptance and legalization of contraceptives. Those who supported the use of contraceptives sought to abolish several so-called Comstock laws, put in place primarily through the influence of Anthony Comstock, who advocated against obscenity, abortion, contraception, and other forms of degenerate and reprobate behavior. Unfortunately, by the 60s and 70s, the use of contraception, as well as other degeneracies, was growing, forever changing the course of this country and, really, the entire Western world. If you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. As for this video, make sure to like, comment your thoughts below, and share with others. Thank you and God bless you. Before we begin, I want to note that I am not a moral theologian. I'm just a guy who reads and makes videos about what he reads. For authentic moral teaching, consult the Catechism as well as other approved teachers on moral theology, such as St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Alphonsus Liguori. The popes of the Catholic Church for decades had been warning about this rise in debauchery. Pope Pius XI, in the year 1930, warned about this in his exceptional encyclical Casti Connubii, or Chaste Wedlock. He writes, quote, "A great number of men, forgetful of that divine work of redemption, either entirely ignore or shamelessly deny the great sanctity of Christian wedlock, or relying on the false principles of a new and utterly perverse morality, too often trample it underfoot. And since these most pernicious errors and depraved morals have begun to spread even amongst the faithful and are gradually gaining ground, in our office as Christ's vicar upon earth and supreme shepherd and teacher, we consider it our duty to raise our voice, to keep the flock committed to our care from poisoned pastures, and, as far as in us lies, to preserve it from harm." End quote. He notes that such perversity was growing in practice and support, not only in the world, but among the faithful as well. Consulting the National Survey of Family Growth, Series 23, Number 10, conducted by the Department of Health and Human Services, we see that between the 60s and 70s, about 56 to 70% of married women, ages 15 to 44, used contraception. When analyzed by race, white women were recorded to use it more often than black women. By religion, white Protestant women used it slightly more than Catholics, only by a few percentage points. An important note, however, is that this survey considers the rhythm method as a form of contraception, even though it is not intrinsically wrong. In the rhythm method, there is no obstruction or perversion of the reproductive system. Instead, the wife's fertility cycle is tracked throughout the month, yielding the days in which she is most and least fertile. Thus, we see that a significant amount of white Catholic women used the rhythm method in 1965, much more than Protestant women, though that number decreased dramatically over the next decade. In this method, one still remains open to the inseparable result of the marital act, which is the conception of the offspring, while choosing to engage in the act on a day of low fertility. While it is not intrinsically wrong to use this method, it can certainly be used in a sinful way, for while it is not wrong to not currently desire children for proper reasons, there are certainly selfish reasons to not desire a child. As a brief example, consider a married couple struggling financially to feed their 6 children to a couple who simply wants to save up money to buy a boat. It is obvious that these are two entirely different situations. But again, I am not a moral theologian, so consult your priest, the catechism, the saints, or a manual on moral theology for more specific advice. On this, Pope St. Paul VI, Humanae Vitae, says, quote, "If therefore there are well-grounded reasons for spacing births, arising from the physical or psychological condition of husband or wife, or from external circumstances, the Church teaches that married people may then take advantage of the natural cycles imminent in the reproductive system and engage in marital intercourse only during those times that are infertile, thus controlling birth in a way which does not in the least offend the moral principles which we have just explained." End quote. When it comes to the contraceptive pill, the percentage of black married couples using it doubled from 1965 to 1973, surpassing white couples, which previously used it more than by 12%. Parallel to this rise in contraception during the late 20th century is the rise in abortion, fornication, sodomy, homosexuality, and other degeneracies. Hence, between the 1960s and 80s, the number of black children with one or both parents absent rose from about 30% to 50%, and of those 50%, almost 90% were fatherless. How did governments respond to this? Rather than removing the root of the evil, there were started many welfare programs that aimed at financially supporting single mothers. While it is not at all wrong to help these women in need, it of course provides encouragement for marriages undergoing financial or other difficulties to file for a divorce. As Pope Pius XI says, quote, "We are sorry to know that not infrequently nowadays, it happens that through a certain inversion of the true order of things, ready and bountiful assistance is provided for the unmarried mother and her illegitimate offspring, who of course must be helped in order to avoid a greater evil, which is denied to legitimate mothers or giving sparingly or almost grudgingly." End quote. Contraception is thus not only intrinsically evil, but propagates bad fruit in society. It disorders the individual spouses and perverts the marital union, thereby disordering the society to which it belongs. How does the permissibility of contraception lead to the acceptance of fatherlessness and even abortion? Well, it places the fulfillment of lustful desire at the center of the marital act, seeing the offspring produced as a remote and distant result that presents itself as a burden rather than a gift. It further begins to transform the other spouse into an object of pleasure rather than a human of dignity. As Pope St. Paul VI writes, quote, "A man who grows accustomed to the use of contraceptive methods may forget the reverence due to a woman and, disregarding her physical and emotional equilibrium, reduce her to being a mere instrument for the satisfaction of his own desires, no longer considering her as his partner whom he should surround with care and affection." End quote. Pope Pius XI comments, quote, "Some justify this criminal abuse on the ground that they are wary of children and wish to gratify their desires without their consequent burden. Others say that they cannot on the one hand remain continent, nor on the other can they have children because of the difficulties, whether on the part of the mother or on the part of family circumstances. Since, therefore, the conjugal act is destined primarily by nature for the begetting of children, those who in exercising it deliberately frustrate its natural power and purpose, they sin against nature and commit a deed which is shameful and intrinsically vicious." End quote. He then connects this to the sin of Onan, calling it a horrible crime that incurs the, quote, "guilt of a grave sin." End quote. Onan appears in Genesis 38. He was the son of Judah and was told to provide a child for his deceased brother's wife, Tamar. The text reads, quote, "And Judah took a wife for Her, his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. And Her, the firstborn of Judah, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and was slain by him. Judah therefore said to Onan, his son, Go into thy brother's wife and marry her, that thou mayest raise seed to thy brother. He, knowing that the children should not be his, when he went into his brother's wife, spilled his seed upon the ground, lest children should be born in his brother's name. And therefore the Lord slew him, because he did a detestable thing." End quote. Now, similar to how the sin of sodomy takes its name from the wicked city of Sodom, and how the sin of simony takes its name from Simon Magus, who sought to purchase the power of confirmation in Acts chapter 8. So also the sin of onanism takes its name from the biblical passage of Genesis 38. Onanism is a distortion and turning away of the man's ejaculation from its proper end, which is the introduction of his seed into his wife. This is usually done to avoid impregnation, though it is also wrong if done for any other reason. Several modern and liberal scholars and exegetes, rejecting the plain sense of the text and the traditional interpretation, say that the sin of Onan was actually his refusal to provide children for his brother's wife and fulfill the levirate marriage obligation. Yet, this is not the traditional reading. St. Augustine wrote, quote, "Intercourse with a lawful wife is illicit and shameful when the conception of offspring is deliberately avoided. This is what Onan, the son of Judah, did, and God struck him because of it. Therefore, the begetting of children is the primary, natural, and lawful purpose of marriage, and thus, those who marry because of incontinent desire should not so temper their evil as to destroy the good of marriage, that is, the propagation of children." End quote. Gobertus on Novigento says, quote, "He spills his seed upon the ground when he turns the good that he does into earthly glory." End quote. This was also the reading of many Protestants. For example, William Gouge, an English Puritan, writes, quote, "The punishment inflicted on Onan showeth how great a wrong this is. From that punishment the Hebrews gather that this sin is a kind of murder. It is so much the more heinous when hatred, stoutness, niceness, fear of having too many children, or any other like aspect are the cause thereof." End quote. And Jeremy Taylor, an Anglican, writes, quote, "Concerning which our best rule is, that although in this, as in eating and drinking, there is an appetite to be satisfied, which cannot be done without pleasing that desire, yet since that desire and satisfaction was intended by nature for other ends, they should never be separate from those ends, but always be joined with all or one of these ends, with a desire of children or to avoid fornication, or to lighten and ease the cares and sadness of household affairs, and to endear each other, but never with a purpose, either in act or desire, to separate the sensuality from these ends which hallow it. Onan did separate his act from its proper end, and so ordered his embraces that his wife should not conceive, and God punished him." End quote. The use of contraceptives, therefore, as a direct obstruction of the reproductive power, is an abomination in the sight of God. It is not only condemned by the natural law, but we have its clear condemnation in Holy Writ, tradition, and the magisterium. As Catholics, we might see other Christians or even our own fellow Catholics who engage in the use of contraception. Sometimes, unfortunately, this might even be our very own family members. It is our responsibility to, with prudence and charity, to approach them and inform them of the teaching of the Church and of Holy Scripture. These conversations are obviously difficult to have, but if we truly care for the salvation of their souls, we will have them. Again, make sure to consult your priest or a spiritual director about these topics, for I am not a moral theologian. I hope this video was a good stepping stone into further reading. You can read Pope Pius XI's Casti Connubii, or St. Paul VI's Humanae Vitae, or many other documents from the Church which speak on these similar topics. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like, share with others, comment, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and may God bless you.